So thank you very much. Vanakkam to everyone here. I just wanted to start by saying Sebastian made a very good presentation. I hope you gained a lot from that. And as far as the will comes, I can say if there is a will, there is a way. So that's the way to start. From the Bombay Stock Exchange, obviously my topic which has been given is about investors' rights and what they should do and what they shouldn't do. But I thought that before I do that, I will just probably give a broad interlude because I can see a lot of young people here. So I thought that probably I will just explain to them what the financial landscape is and what does the stock exchange symbolize and what does SEBI as a regulator actually do and what we are trying to make this entire financial services ecosystem much more safe and also something which actually makes the well-being of the country and all the citizens in the country in terms of giving them investment security and at the same time converting their savings into actually productive investments, which is what is going to finally make our country prosper. So it's actually in some sense a good cycle, not a vicious cycle, but a good cycle. And that is exactly what we all are here trying to do. And that is the reason why like when Sabyashi as an expert on personal finance, he said, you have to look at a balanced portfolio. So like in life we say, anything which is too much, anything when you consume too much, then it becomes bad, it becomes a poison. Similarly, if you avoid something, then again you're failing because again it's something which you're not taking. So that's why maintaining that balance is extremely important. So let me just start by first talking about Bombay Stock Exchange, just a little bit. BSE, we are no longer, Bombay has become Mumbai. So what we did is, we just made ourselves BSE. So like General Electric was originally a company which now became GE. So we are just BSE. Some people can call it the Bharat Stock Exchange if they want. So we are almost a 140-year-old exchange. And I don't think there is any financial institution, including the regulators here, pardon me for that, but in some sense, we are actually older than most of the people. In fact, I keep joking with some of the people that we are even older than the Indian National Congress, right? So even State Bank, which was the Imperial Bank of India, was born in 1918. RBI in its original form came out in 1935. So effectively you can say that how long we have been around. And also it also symbolizes in some sense, BSE is nothing but the spirit of India in terms of the financial investment. So we always been a free country. We always been in some sense respected markets. Though we have gone through our own fair share of challenges. We have gone through the entire, in fact we started as a native share and stock brokers association. So this was not a British institution, it was an Indian institution. And secondly, what is important is that we have gone through our fair share of travels. We have seen nationalization, we have seen wars being fought, we have actually gone into extreme socialism, we were following that path. But now obviously we are back to capitalism. In that sense, markets are again rising and markets are becoming more and more important. And what does markets represent? Simply in terms of that, it simply means economic freedom. You have a choice to do what you want, but you have to make that right choice. If you make a wrong choice, you will suffer for that. That is why we always say there are risk factors when you look at markets. So and here that is why I keep saying there is a caveat emptor principle for all buyers and they have to make mature choices. So we don't allow young people below 18 who are not adults, children to make investments. So we only allow adults to make investment. And obviously, the first thing which is required is financial literacy. And this is very, very important. And what we have tried to do is, apart from just running the exchange, we also run an educational institute. It's called the BSE Institute. Just like 140-year-old institution, even our educational institute, BSE Institute, was set up in 1987. So we have been in this financial literacy campaign for the last 35 years now almost. And why I'm saying that is because what we are trying to do is we are trying to impart education right from kindergarten kids right up to old people. So people who are to start understanding counting in terms of simple understanding of time value of money. So we have created very simple games which we go to small kindergarten and primary education schools and we teach them snake and ladders, talk to them about protection and talk to them about why insurance is important. And that's how we play that game. And similarly, we have simple games like Ludo, right? We have even some of our traditional South Indian games like Pallanguri, and Dayakattam and all that we teach in that sense. What we try to do is we try to teach them the various phases. And what basically he talked about the personal finance, when you are at different stages, you need different needs. And when you also are at different stages, your financial investment also should accordingly dovetail. So that's why the goal is extremely important, because if you don't have a goal, you are wandering aimlessly, meaninglessly, and if you make investment in that psyche and in that mindset, obviously you're not going to do anything, because you really don't know what you're trying to do, right? So that's the one thing. Now what does the stock exchange do? A stock exchange is nothing but an infrastructure. We are a market infrastructure institution. When I say that, when, for example, for normal things, what do we need? We need schools, we need colleges. These are educational infrastructures. We need roads. These are transport infrastructure. We need all these wires which fly, which is basically through which power comes. So that's basically an infrastructure for giving energy security. Similarly, we have infrastructure in the form of airwaves, which is now what is giving us all this digital world, which is whether it's audiovisual television or whether it's your mobile and phone, all these works on that. So that's the telecom infrastructure. Similarly, we have ports, which are very old, seaports, airports, and so on and so forth. So similarly, for the financial market, that infrastructure is the stock exchange. And what the stock exchange does in terms of financial infrastructure is, in some sense, becomes a docking station for all the people who want to finally convert that savings into investment, which goes into productive areas. So that's what we call as the primary market. And why we want to do that? We want to do that so that we can create wealth for everyone. And that's where I started by saying that you start by taking the household savings to the productive manufacturing or the service sector economy, which actually starts creating GDP for you, and that's how the multiplier happens. And more the positive power of this multiplier, the more faster you become, and we'll propel from a third world country into a first world country, and that is what it takes. If we go into non-productive investments, like we still have some of the traditional routes, like we keep holding on to gold, to physical assets, which are actually in some sense dead. They don't really yield this positive impact. That multiplier is not a positive one. It's just creating hoarding. And that hoarding actually takes away, draws away that multiplier and slows you down in terms of your growth phase. And that is what is very, very important for people to understand. So this is like different gears. So if you want to put a reverse gear, then obviously you start going into those dead assets. But if you want to go into high gear, then obviously the topmost gear is the equity, which is the true risk class asset, which is basically I'm saying I'm giving you some money. Hopefully you use it well and you make profits out of it and you can pay me dividends, which is the highest form of the riskiest class of asset. And in some sense, when we say markets, why do we still call it a stock market? Because the stock is the ultimate symbol, as Sabyashi rightly put, the juiciest fruit on the top of the tree is nothing but the equity. But obviously to reach that, you have to go through the paces to climb that tree. So you have to slowly start building your skills to reach there. And that's where again this financial literacy comes. And financial literacy is nothing but skill building to know how to convert your savings into really good investment. Each of us earn money and we can save some money. We can spend some money and we can be, which is used for consumption, whatever basics. And then there is a saving. And that saving, how do we own it to actually become a multiplier so that we can actually convert that income into wealth? And that is what basically we are trying to transform ourselves into. And as an exchange, what we have done, when I talked about the infrastructure, what is the role which we have done? What we have done is we have created in some sense a huge brand like BSE and NSE today. These are the two exchanges, which are the two infrastructures, which in some sense we have created competing infrastructures. So which means we cannot charge monopoly rentals. So what we have tried to do is we have tried to create an environment where people, if they come to us, then there are lots of rules. Just like, for example, what is the difference between a normal society and a civil society? A civil society is nothing but governed by rules. So everybody has to follow a code. Like similarly, out here in the stock exchange, what we have done is we have codified how this entire cycle of savings to investment will happen. And we have tried to put a rule book. And in some sense, we try to ensure that conviction happens. We try to ensure with outside the court system. We try to ensure that everybody who is a player in this market, who symbolize different aspects, they all actually play their part. And if they don't play their part, in some sense, we try to intervene and we try to manage it. That is why when I say, who is the customer here? The customer is finally the investor. He is the last. Who is the manufacturer? The manufacturer are the people who give those products. For me, the manufacturers are those listed companies, which are all the industrialists, right? Then which range from everything. Whatever you see a TCS, you see a Infosys, all these are products of the stock exchange. They are the ones who are the manufacturers who come and list out there. And similarly, the mutual fund AMC. So now we are going to see Birla speak. So obviously they are another manufacturer. Okay, what they are doing is they are in some sense a tertiary manufacturer. They come, take that, they are professionals, and again invest in these companies or in these products, and then they try to multiply that money for you. So this is what we actually bring on the table. So these are two set of players. Now within these two set of players, there is a huge gap. So one party wants to attract money or raise capital, which we call as entrepreneurship. And that is extremely essential. So we actually symbolize that entrepreneurship side from the manufacturing side. And the other side, obviously these entrepreneurs need capital. So one is, when we talk about capital, there are multiple forms of capital. One is just money, which is pure financial capital. Then there is human capital and managerial capital and so on and so forth. So now typically the thing is, what we try to bridge is, if you have the financial capital, you can actually start building all the other capitals. If you want a good skilled laborer, you have to pay him a higher wage. Then obviously you need that financial capital to come in. And that is what we try to attract from the investor. And that is what the capital market is all about. That is why we use stock market and capital market in a very synonymous fashion and a synonymous way. So what have we done in terms of evolution? Almost I will say, in fact, our standee out here says we have pioneered the equity cult in this country for almost now 140 years, right? So that is the pyramid which we are trying to build. Now, obviously, when everybody is chasing returns, but when chasing returns, what do we suffer? We suffer risk, right? So the next evolution was in the financial markets to provide risk management products. So this entire derivatives universe is nothing but risk management markets. It's about only risk transfer. It's in some sense a little bit of insurance within that. Like he said, from 2 lakhs, I want to go to 1 lakh. One way to do is go and sell that asset and sell 1 lakh and do it. Other way is to basically ride it and just take an exposure which is short going through a futures or an options market to reduce that exposure to 1 lakh. So you can do it tailored. So that is how the risk management market ends up working. So these are some of the products. And obviously as a stock exchange now, we are morphing from just a stock as a product, which was a one single product, one pony product, to now virtually a basket of different products. So we are now straddling equity as an asset class, debt as an asset class. We are straddling foreign exchange, the currency markets. All of these are now under one roof. And now with last month, with the merger of the commodities market with the securities market, very soon we'll also be starting with our commodity as soon as we get the permissions from SEBI for that. So what we have tried to do is we are now created an infrastructure which is exactly like your supermarket mall. In one place, you can go and get all the things which you need for a financial capital. Like today you go to a nice mall, right from your food needs to the grocery, to the food bazaar, to your clothes, to your electronics, to whatever needs which you have. Everything is pampered. If you want to get entertained, your cinema halls there. If you want to have food, have a good time, there are entertainment for your children, everything, it's packaged. So what we are doing is we are morphing ourselves into a market infrastructure institution which is actually catering into almost the entire thing. And for mutual funds also, we do distribution. So effectively what we are trying to do is we are trying to harness and ensure that today, for example, a lot of people, like for example insurance, a guy will come, he will only sell LIC. Say some IFA comes, he will only probably sell Birla mutual fund or a Reliance mutual fund or ICE. What we are trying to say is, if that guy is only distributing that product, for example, somebody is a showroom only for Samsung, he only keeps Samsung products. You will not prefer that, because unless you have made up your mind to already made a decision, I will not buy Apple, I will not buy some other phone, but only Samsung, then I will go there. But otherwise, if you want, when you have an open mind, then you will want to go to a place who will be able to tell you what is this Samsung phone, what is this Apple phone, what is this Gioni, what is this, all the other ones, which is what suits you, what is your budget, what is your need, whether it fits you or not. Well, then you can make an informed decision what you want. So exactly that is what, as a stock exchange, we are trying to do. We are trying to create a purely a democratic platform where we are putting huge amount of information. We are also attracting a lot of advisors and intermediaries who are our brokers or the IFAs to become our members, who in some sense then start explaining to you what it is. So I'm not saying that in my mall there are no shopkeepers. There are a lot of shopkeepers. All the shopkeepers are nothing but the brokers, the intermediaries, all of these. These are the ones who are trying to explain to the customer what the products are, what is it that is good for them. And obviously sometimes they do mis-selling, sometimes they don't, sometimes they do the right selling. And in some sense, that is why that still that same principle of caveat emptor happens. But if they do some deliberate mis-selling, and that is why we tell the investor, in fact, we have got in the booklet a nice one-pager printout, which explains to the investor what are the do's and the don'ts. Like for example, if I go to a shop and if I take a bill, and if the product becomes defective, I can go back and return it. Similar to that, if there is some mis-selling happening, and if you got the contract note, you got the proper KYC, you got the proper record, you got the bill and the receipt, then obviously you have full recourse to ensure that whatever loss or whatever thing which you suffer, you can in some sense try to get compensation back for that. And that is why we are there, SEBI is there. Our role as a stock exchange is limited to protecting, basically governing the intermediary. We are as a mall responsible for the shopkeeper's behavior. SEBI as our oversight regulator is responsible for giving license to us as a mall. It's responsible to also regulate the shopkeepers whom we take. And it's also having the responsibility for the customers, which is the investors. So effectively, they are the oversight regulator. And in some sense, the score system which we talked about is nothing but a simple open thing where you can put your complaints on anything under the sun on the securities market. And they redress and they come back to you. That is the beauty of this. And what have we done? Today, for example, the Prime Minister keep talking about three things: Make in India, Skill India, and Digital India. We know that these three themes probably cover everything which India needs in a large way. Because if you can do all these three things, we'll become as good as a US or a first world nation. We'll become a real powerful this thing. As a stock exchange, actually we enable all these three things. This education campaign, this literacy is nothing but skilling. It's about skilling people. And also very importantly, if you look at any country, almost, for example, in our country, almost 1/4 of the GDP is nothing but a financial service industry. You can call it the BFSI, the banking, financial service, and the insurance sector. So 1/4 of the total jobs of this country has to still come from this industry. So these skills, we need a lot of people who can become advisors, people who can do back office, people who can do accounting in this financial market, people who can become stockbrokers, people who can become sales agents. So there are so many. Similarly, somebody who can become a teller in a bank, somebody who can be a loan official, somebody who goes and appraises, somebody who is an assayer in an insurance company, and so forth. So these are all the jobs, these are the skills which we actually need and which we need to develop. And that will come through this financial literacy. And that is why it's very important that for the next generation, because even if you look at the demography of India, now almost, I will say 65% of India is below the age of 35. So they are virtually in a stage where they can actually start bringing in a lot of savings which can come into the markets. And to that extent, our GDP growth will propel even further and faster and faster. It's like a snowball. We started very small. Now we have gone to a reasonable size of 2 trillion. From here, the ball will become larger and faster. And that is what will happen. And this entire set of people, obviously, they need to be well educated. When I say well educated, they need to be financially literate. They should understand what it is. And in some sense, we are creating that organized market base for that. Today, for example, in our stock market, we have only 2 crore investors. If you look at it, we have 125 crore population. And if I look at households, like typically we assume that average unit size in India is about 4 to 5 people. Even if I assume on the 5 people, we are looking at 25 crore households. So assuming that even one person who is the income earner, at least 25 crore investors should be there. Okay, let's assume that, say, the bottom 20 or 25% is not there. Still, we are looking at a 20 crore investor base, which is what we need. Whereas we are at a 2 crore investor base. So effectively, we have got a 10-fold increase possibility. And this is something which probably will happen in the next 10 to 15 years. So that is the kind of a size, that is what our demography is. And what's important, this demography can either be a great boon or a curse. How it can be a curse? If you don't productively employ all these people, if you don't give those skill sets to them, and if they cannot be employed gainfully, if they can't become productive to the country, then obviously we will end up creating huge amount of unemployment, unrest, so on. So this will create virtually another problem for us as a country. So it's very important that we get our children, our people to start focusing on the positive things, become productive, become useful for the country, and in that sense obviously they have to enrich themselves. And if I can take care of my own shoe and my boat, I can tie my own lace, I'm fine, I don't have to worry, because then I'm not a burden on anybody. That's exactly what it is. And similarly, given the pace of life, and given the way the whole degeneration of the family system is happening, old people will have to start fending for themselves. We don't have a real good social security with this Aadhaar and all these which are now getting put up now with all this Prime Minister's plan on insurance, this, that. We are probably going to get into a social security situation probably 25 years down the road. But for this generation, we obviously will have to start worrying about our own retirement. We cannot depend on our children. So that's why it's important for us to invest for our own sake. And given the huge rapid advancements in medical technology, all of us are going to live longer. Even though I may be a diabetic, I may be heart attack, I can still live with a pacemaker, I can still live with all those glucose, all this diabetic, this thing which is going to make me live longer. So for me, when he said 100 years, we are going to get soon to average mean life of close to 100. So we have to start worrying about living up to that. And in some sense, in the later part, we cannot work so hard. We cannot be so productive. So we have to be productive now and plan ahead and ensure that later on, these passive investments which you make in this market start taking care of our income needs. So this is again another important takeaway for all of us. The last thing which I wanted to talk about was basically